and succulent growers, it's Lynn, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the epiphytic cacti that need to be overwintered indoors in a warmer temperature and the ones that can do okay in a cooler temperature. Now this was a video request from my wonderful friend Magda here on YouTube. And Magda has an amazing YouTube channel, Succulents and Cactus with Magda. And if you're not familiar with Magda's amazing YouTube channel, do go over and subscribe to her. I'll link Magda's channel up above. And thank you, Magda, for the video request. I have made many videos on how to overwinter cacti and succulents, but I wanted to do one a little bit more in detail with epiphytic cacti because one size doesn't fit all with them, and there's many different types as well. And I can only talk about my own experience of how I overwinter mine, and from many years of having these epiphytes, I know which ones, for me anyway, do a lot better at a cool temperature and other ones that do much better in the house at a house room temperature. Now I'm going to go through and show you the ones I've got in my collection. I'm not going to show you the whole collection. I have made a complete video on the whole of our epiphytic collection, and I've also made a video on how to care for and grow epiphytic cactus plants. So I'll link both of them videos down below in the video description. It'll tell you a lot more in there, and also do go and see a whole tour of my epiphytic collection. I'm just going to show you a few of mine as an example, and hopefully it'll give you an idea, if you have these type of epiphytes, which ones need to come into a room temperature for winter and which ones can do well either in your cold porch, an unheated room, or even in your greenhouse, depending on your minimum winter temperatures. Now first I'm going to start off with this one, and this is a Seleniserius anthonianus, what a name, also called Cryptoserius, and this one is very similar to the zigzag epiphyllum, but it's actually not. It is related obviously to the epiphyllum, but it's different to the normal zigzag. You can tell by its leaves, and it has sort of lovely red flowers on it. But this one, in my experience, is definitely not cold hardy, and I find all of the Seleniserius group of epiphytes are not cold hardy. They need a minimum of 10 degrees Celsius, which is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So this one is going to come in. The Seleniserius definitely bring inside to the house. This one here is one of my lovely wide leaves, Rhipsalis, and I think this is Rhipsalis platycarpa. It's a lovely big wide leaves, and this one in my experience is not cold hardy either. It's one that does need to be kept at a minimum of 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I do know some growers that do have this in their unheated greenhouses here in Ireland, and they say they overwinter it fine, but I find it does, as you can see here, gets very damaged with scabbiness if it's kept below 10 Celsius. So if you have this one, I would recommend bringing it into the house to overwinter at a minimum winter temperature of 10°C, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Now this Rhipsalis is Rhipsalis teres, and I've got a few of these similar type of Rhipsalis. They're not all the same ones, but they're similar in appearance. They're sort of quite thick stems, and another one there as well, more of a smaller stemmed one. Quite unusual, and sort of grow like sticks, and I have them here with my euphorbia sticks on fire, even though it's not anything to do with this plant. I like the way they sort of grow. It looks a bit similar, so I've got it there. But that's a euphorbia succulent. These are cactus, and these in my experience are very cold hardy. They overwinter absolutely no problem here in the polytunnel at 5 Celsius, which is 41 degrees Fahrenheit. They do very well, no problem at all. In fact, they have lovely blooms on them in the winter time. These are all little berries, because it was also blooming in the summer as well. And I do have to give these a bit of water in the winter. As I say, all my other cacti I keep totally dry over the winter. I've stopped watering all of these now. They won't have a scrap of water until probably next April possibly. But the epiphytes are rainforest cacti, and they do need to be watered. The difference is, if I had these in the house, I'd probably be watering them every week or so, but in the polytunnel, because it's kept cold, 5°C, 41 degrees Fahrenheit, I just give a bit of water once every 6 weeks, just to stop the stems from really shriveling. And because they also bloom in the winter for me, it's nice to have a bit of colour here in the polytunnel. That's why I do still have to keep watering these a little bit. But Definitely a cold hardy one, as long as you can keep it at 5 Celsius, the bare minimum. Same with this one as well. This one is another different type. I think this one, I've got the name of this is Piteri, yeah, Rhipsalis Piteri. Again, quite a wacky looking one, cold hardy too. Now this one is a Selenicerius one, and this is not cold hardy. It's one that gets, I've overwintered it the one year in the polytunnel, and it got a lot of stem damage. So this one I know definitely has to be overwintered at a minimum of 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Here we've got a lot of Epiphyllum seedlings, and Epiphyllums themselves, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, are actually very cold hardy. I overwinter all of my Epiphyllums in the polytunnel, practically dry all through the winter. I may have to give them a bit of water sort of in the January, but other than that they're kept pretty dry. But these are all seedlings, and because they're young and I'm going to have to keep watering them very regular, I'm going to overwinter these in the grow room because they're still young, and cactus seedlings of any description don't like to be kept dry over the winter. They need to have warmth while they're still actively in their young growing stage. Now these are my Hylocereus cacti, commonly known as dragon fruit cactus, and these are most definitely not cold hardy. These cannot take anything really even below 10 Celsius. They'll literally turn to mush overnight. I've had many bad experiences when I've had Hylocereus before, and I've just had the odd cold night at 7 Celsius even when I had them in my conservatory at my other house, and they used to just rot like anything. So these are out here now in my polytunnel, but the nights are still quite mild. Don't have to worry just yet, but these will be the first to come into the house to overwinter very soon as the nights start getting colder. I've got some more over there as well. They do really well out here in the polytunnel in the spring, summer and the early fall, but definitely can't take any cold. So minimum degree these would take, I would say, even more than 10. I would say 12 degrees Celsius minimum, about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And sometimes these are used as grafting stock for Gymnoclisium, the Myhavinci. And the disastrous thing with that is because you'll think, oh, you know, Gymnoclisiums are quite cold hardy, which they are. But if you've got them on a grafting stock like Hylocereus and you have it out in your greenhouse unheated, then it would literally turn to mush. So these are plants that do have to be overwintered, minimum of 12 Celsius. 10 is the absolute minimum for more of a mature plant, but I would say 12 Celsius, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Now here I have a selection of a few of my smaller growing epiphytes here. I've got a mixture of Christmas and Thanksgiving cactus, Schlumbergera, and also some Rhipsalidopsis Easter cactus. This is the miniature Easter cactus here, and that overwinters well. It actually overwinters better at a cool temperature. I find that when I had these in the house, because I thought, oh, they're only small and they're going to need heat, they didn't do so well. They kept dropping a lot of leaf segments. So these do better for me when I overwinter them in the polytunnel. And I use the word overwinter probably in the wrong way, because these type of epiphytes don't overwinter. They actually grow and flower during the winter time, but I use the word overwintering because that's where I'm keeping them for the winter. And lots of different types of Schlumbergera here, they do really well. Look, these have all grown from seed and they do amazing well. Again, I do have to water these in the winter because I say they're winter budding, and you can see there's lots of buds already starting on these Thanksgiving cactus. So these are going to be blooming lovely very soon. And I keep these, because they're in small pots especially, I keep them lightly watered and let the soil totally dry out before I water again. If I had them in the house, I'd probably be watering them a lot more because they're kept at a cool temperature at 5C, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. I keep them a little bit more on the drier side, but obviously I do water them frequently because they are winter flowering. But Schlumbergera, Thanksgiving cactus and that are all pretty cold hardy as well at minimum 5C. 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Great for porches or unheated conservatories or unheated rooms as well. But they also do well inside the house in the winter, even in a heated room. These go by the flowering more so with the light levels. So bear in mind, if you have these in the house and you have it in your living room and you have lights on and things like that, it may not flower for you because they do like to have the nighttime the shorter day length is what triggers them to flowering, as well as cooler night temperatures. So if you have them in the house, you have the heating on during the day and the heating on overnight, and there's not really any drop in temperature, and you have the lights on in the house overnight, they may not flower. And I have made a complete video on the reasons why your Christmas and Thanksgiving cactus is not flowering for you, and do watch that video because it can help you out. A lot of people say that they've had a Christmas cactus or Thanksgiving cactus for years and it's never flowered, and that could be many reasons why. So I'll link that video up above and down below in the video description. Now, this is my Schlumbergera truncata, commonly known as the Thanksgiving cactus. And these cacti are very cold hardy. I mean, as long as you keep them at a minimum of 5 Celsius, which is 41 degrees Fahrenheit, they can do really well in cold, unheated porches. And they grow sort of both well even in a greenhouse and in a house as well, as long as you can protect them from excess cold. I would say a bare minimum of 5 Celsius, 41 Fahrenheit. I over this one in the polytunnel. It produces the most gorgeous flowers around the sort of November, sometimes late October, November, even into the December time. And I just want to mention, if you have these in the house and you have it in a warm heated room, then make sure that when it's coming into bud, keep it watered pretty much all the time. Let the soil dry out slightly in between watering before watering again. But because I keep this one in my polytunnel, which is kept cold, 5 Celsius is cold, I just water this every time the soil completely dries out. I let it go a little bit longer in between waterings because it is kept cooler, but obviously it doesn't like to go too long without water because it is an epiphyte, and I don't want it to drop its buds. It's coming into bud already. Now here is the true Christmas cactus, because it has the scalloped edge into the leaves. Now again, this is another one that it can be a little bit more temperamental than the Schlumbergera truncata, the Thanksgiving cactus. It can have a habit of dropping some of its leaf segments and things like that if it's kept too cold. But I find myself, as long as it's kept at a bare minimum of 5C, 41 degrees Fahrenheit, it will do absolutely fine. And again, if you're keeping it at a cold temperature, say you have it in, for example, me in my polytunnel, or you have it in an unheated room, conservatory or porch or anything like that, then be careful with the watering. Don't keep it wet in wet soil, because it won't like that with cold temperatures. But at the same time, you don't want it to go too long without being watered, because they are winter flowering. So just water every time the soil has completely dried out. That's a good guide, whether you have it in the house or you have it in a unheated conservatory porch, or you have it in your polytunnel. Again, minimum 5C, 41 degree Fahrenheit. Now here we with the epiphyllums, and I have quite a few different types growing out here in the yard, and I'm going to be bringing these into overwinter into the polytunnel pretty soon, because the night temperatures are starting to drop. Now epiphyllums have in my experience, are very cold hardy, as long as you can give them an absolute bare minimum of 5 degrees Celsius, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. They'll overwinter well in many greenhouses. I mean, I know growers that actually don't heat their greenhouses, and they just cover them with fleece cloth in their greenhouses in the winter, and they say as long as they're kept frost free, they'll be fine. But I personally find if they're kept too cold, they'll tend to get a little bit of leaf damage, so I like to keep them at the minimum of 5, and they overwinter well. I do sometimes have to give them a little bit of water in the middle of winter, usually, well, sometimes around the January time, because the leaf segments get very, very dehydrated. But that's the only time I'll give them a bit of water. The rest of the time I keep them dry, because they're the one type of epiphytic cactus, in my experience, if they're kept in cool temperatures, they can definitely go drier in the pots. And then when I water them again in the spring, from the March, April time, they fatten up, the leaves go all nice and firm, and then they burst into flower. And they seem to they prefer a cool and mostly dry overwintering. But again, when I say mostly dry, that doesn't mean that they have to go dry all through the winter. Keep an eye on the leaves. If you find that they're starting to shrivel a hell of a lot, give them just a little bit of water and they'll fatten up again. But personally, my experience, keeping them more drier over the winter and then giving them a good drink, however wrinkled they are, they're fattened back up again in the spring, and then they're more ready to come into flower again. My zigzag epiphyllum here, and this again can take 5 Celsius, 41 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter, as long as it's protected from frost and temperatures no lower than that. And again, I keep it more on the dry side in the winter as well. It's been blooming beautiful, and I have filmed a buds to blooms video. Rhipsalidopsis rosea, commonly known as the Easter cactus, or now it comes under the Schlumbergera group now, apparently. It's changed its genus, but I'll always be calling it Rhipsalidopsis. And I've got a few different types in here. This again, I overwinter in my polytunnel at a minimum of 5C, 41F. Does absolutely fine. I do sometimes have to give it a bit of water, usually sort of in the January time, because it goes sort of very limp and straggy, and I have to give it a bit of a water. And when I do, even though it's January, I do give it a little bit of tomato feed to encourage blooming, and then usually from the March, April it comes into flower. So this is one that's obviously a spring bloomer. Well, it's called Easter cactus. And again, another cold hardy one, as long as you don't let temperatures drop below 5C. Now here I have my Solenicerius. This is Solenicerius Workley, and Solenicerius is not cold hardy. So this one, if you have this type of epiphyte, it does need to be overwintered at a minimum of 10 Celsius, which is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Solenicerius don't like it to be below 10C in the winter time, otherwise you're going to get a lot of leaf damage and a lot of leaf segments fall off. So this is one that's going to be overwintered indoors. This one is now, and funny, this is another Rhipsalis here. This is Alboreolata, has lovely orange flowers. And this one again is not, this particular type of Rhipsalis, in my experience, is not cold hardy. I did overwinter it the one year in the polytunnel, and it got a lot of dieback on the leaves. So this is one I'm definitely going to be bringing in. So I'd recommend with this particular Rhipsalis 10 Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit minimum for winter. So bring it indoors. Now this one is Rhipsalis pilocarpa, and this one, I mean, it's got a lot of red on it because it's had a lot of sun. This one I find is very cold hardy, and this overwinters in our polytunnel at 5 Celsius. 50 degrees Fahrenheit, absolutely no problem at all. I do sometimes have to give a bit of water again, maybe in the January time, just to plump it up because it does go quite limp. And if you're, as I say, overwintering epiphytes in the house and it's warm and it's heated, you can carry on sort of watering it about once a month, but I keep them more drier than ideal because they're in the polytunnel, which is cold. But this does well. So this one is a common type of Rhipsalis, and again 5 Celsius, 41 degrees Fahrenheit, no problem at all. This one here is Rhipsalis ramelosa, and this one in my experience is not particularly cold hardy either. It seems to suffer with a little bit with bad dry tips. It's already starting to go a little bit like that because it's outside in the yard and the nights are dropping, so I'm going to have to bring this one in soon. This one I'd recommend overwintering in the house at a minimum of 10 Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Now here I am in my grow room, which is also my office. These are the other epiphytes that I've got here, and I sort of keep these in here all year round, and they do really well. They're quite close to a south facing window, and then in the winter time I have the grow lights on, and the light comes right across and gives them a bit of extra light. And these ones are not ones that are cold hardy, and they do well in here all year round, so I keep them in here. And they also prefer a little bit more shade in my experience. And the first one here is Rhipsalis crispata, and it has lovely sort of leaves on it, lovely sort of wavy leaves, a little bit similar in appearance I think to Schlumbergera Christmas and Thanksgiving cactus, a little bit with the leaves, how they are. And this is a gorgeous hanging basket one. But this one here is one that I've overwintered before in the polytunnel at 5 Celsius. It didn't do too well. As you can see, there's a bit of past damage. It has these brown, crispy sort of spots and marks on them if it's kept too cold. So ideally this one I overwinter at, I would recommend a minimum of 10C, 50 degree Fahrenheit. This one that stays in my grow room all year round on the plant stand, and the coldest it would get to in the winter in here would be about 15 Celsius, so I certainly don't have to worry, and it does really well, and it also blooms as well for me in the winter time with lovely little beautiful white little blooms. Here is another Rhipsalis, not sure of what type, but it's like a Rhipsalis pilocarpa variety. I think it's Rhipsalis casutha. I think that's what I bought it as. And this one has very thin stems. And this one, when I try to overwinter this one at 5C, it tends to, again, it doesn't die, but it will drop a load of these very thin leaf segments. So it's one that I find that does need to have a bit more warmth in the winter. So again, if you've got one of these types of Rhipsalis that's very thin stemmed like this one, then I recommend overwintering it at a minimum of 10C, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. This one here is a more newer recent addition, and this is Epiphyllum guatemalense. It's one of the ones with the lovely sort of wavy sort of curly leaves. Epiphyllum guatemalense, nicknamed the curly locks epiphyllum, and this is one of the epiphyllums that is not, in my experience again, cold hardy. I have a couple more of these as well. The first year I overwintered the one in the polytunnel, and it got a lot of black spots and marks, and it didn't do well, and I had to prune it right back in the spring, and then it came back again. So this one is not a cold hardy one, again, in my experience. So if you have this one, the guatemalense, I recommend overwintering it at a minimum of 10C, again 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Lovely in the grow room here, loves the little hanging basket, the macrame hanger. And then this one here is one of my absolute favourites. This is Rhipsalis paradoxa, commonly known as the mistletoe plant, because of its obvious appearance. And it has a gorgeous sort of lovely sort of wavy, amazing long stem segments, and it makes an amazing hanging basket to show you here. This one I've had for a very, very long time. It's very, very long, as you can see there. And it has also gorgeous little white flowers in the winter time, produces little berries, a little bit like mistletoe. And this here, as you can see, is past damage from when I tried to overwinter in it the one year in the polytunnel, and it got a lot of this scarring. So although they could probably take cold temperatures, this particular plant doesn't like it. Had a lot of damage, and it's only sort of regrown over the past couple of years, all the new leaf stems. So I recommend again overwintering this particular Rhipsalis, the paradoxa one, at a minimum of 10C, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, because you don't want to have this scabbiness looking appearance on it. And also it dropped a lot of stem segments as well when I had it in the polytunnel for the winter. So this one again is going to be overwintered here in the office. And then I have another zigzag Epiphyllum Orgaliga, and this is more of a newer recent addition. That's the only reason why I've got it indoors. The other one I have outside that overwinter in the polytunnel. It can be quite cold hard if it's kept relatively dry, just a bit of watering in winter when it starts to shrivel. And that this, as I mentioned, to the one outside can be overwintered at 5C if it's kept fairly dry. And as I mentioned with epiphyllums, they're very different to desert cacti because they can't go all winter completely dry like the desert cacti. So you do have to give them a bit of water, usually once every 6 weeks in the winter time. But this is a cold hardy one. And the only reason why I've got this out here in the grow room, because it just looks nice on here on the plant stand. They can overwinter well indoors and also at a lower temperature too. So you've got best of both worlds with this one. This one here is, I don't know the exact type of Rhipsalis this is. This is quite a thin stemmed one as well. Now this one can be overwintered. I've overwintered this one in the polytunnel, no problem at all at 5 Celsius. But the reason I've got this one indoors here, because I think it looks nice on this plant stand, it gets plenty of light. So I may or may not take that out for the winter. I may keep it on here anyway, again for the winter. So that's the ones in my office, and now I'm going to take you back into the polytunnel. So I hope you found the video useful, and should you have different types of epiphytic cactus, whether it's Christmas cactus, Thanksgiving cactus, Rhipsalis, Epiphyllum, you'll know which ones are cold hardy and which ones have to come into the house. And as I say, it's only really my experience with mine. It can depend on your, if you're lucky enough to live in a lovely warm tropical climate, you can keep these plants practically outside all year because they can take plenty of rain when the temperatures are warm. But obviously I don't have that, so I have to either bring them into overwinter in the polytunnel if they're cold hardy. If not, I have to bring them onto the plant stand upstairs, as you've seen. So thank you so much for watching, and thank you Magda again for the video request, and as I mentioned, do go over and subscribe to Magda's amazing YouTube channel. For lots more growing tips on how to care for and grow different types of cacti and succulents, don't forget to subscribe to me too. Don't forget to click the notification bell. You'll be notified when I upload new videos. And also do check out my website, desertplantsofAvalon.com, for regular articles on caring for different types of cacti and succulents. I want to wish you all an amazing cactus-powered day!